I'm going to show you 4 things to look for early on in a dating relationship that'll tell you whether you should cut and run and cut your losses. You've tuned in to When Your Mind Becomes the Scene of the Crime podcast. I'm Dr. Linda F. Williams. I take survivors of abuse and trauma from pain to purpose so that you take back your power, tap into the truth of who you are, and live your best life now. Let's recap what we covered in part 1 of dating apps. Rule 1, go with what you know and stop playing a losing game. In that section, we talked about the importance of listening carefully, not overlooking anything. Rule 2, you make the choice, not the technology. You make the choice. While the computer might throw out matches, it's like dealing a card game. You have to decide with the hand you're given whether or not you're going to fold that hand or how you're going to play the game. Rule 3, know who you are. We talked about the importance of knowing what your top 3 core values are and acting accordingly, and let those be your guidelines as to with whom you're going to engage. Rule 4, ignore your lying eyes. In that, we talked about how we get into this thing where we're ignoring things, we're focusing on certain aspects of that relationship that we really like, and it's similar to the honeymoon phase we're going to talk about in a minute. It's very important that you don't go with the attraction factor, but to look beyond that. Rule 5, family matters, and so do their issues. In that section, we talked about the importance of knowing a little bit of their background, how they grew up, how that affected them, whether or not they've dealt with the way that those things affected them. And rule 6, the alarm is ringing, stop hitting the snooze button. We talked about the fact that there are always alarm bells going off the whole time, and we tend to ignore those. It's important to pay attention to anything ringing an alarm bell. Now, I'll put a link to last week's video below so that you can go and get the details on all of that. Now, let's get into it. We're going to talk about playing the hand that you're dealt. As I told you last week, you're dealt these cards out of these dating apps, and you pull your hand, and the mistake that a lot of us make is thinking, oh, wow, this is a good match for me. The computer can't go wrong. Well, that's wrong to think, because the computer is throwing out matches based on the information that each person put in there. But was the person putting that information in there being truthful enough with themselves that they could be truthful with their questionnaire answers? But what I want to tell you this week is that it's important to know that there's always a honeymoon phase. This honeymoon phase, it's heady. It's best foot forward, and everybody's on their best behavior. You're putting your best foot forward. Trust me, there's a whole lot of you that's not in the mix. So during these times, it's very easy to ignore realities and glaring warning signs. We'll pump the brakes now on the passion aspect of this progression, because you might end up in the throes of heartbreak instead of the throes of passion. This honeymoon phase is an opportunity to make empowering choices that make the difference between driving the car and being taken for a ride. It determines if the outcome will result in a dating dynamic or a dating debacle. Now, this might require that you do less talking, more listening, and more observing in the beginning of the relationship. So put on your game face and let's dig in. If the chin music, what they say, doesn't line up with the dance, what they do, it's not even worth further investigation. You need to run for the hills. You want to look for contradictions and things like if something seems to be missing in what they're telling you about. When they talk about their background, their family, the job, or life in general, do you get an inkling that something is missing? Those are the warning signs you want to look for. They are not to be ignored. Again, You need to know when to fold the hand and end the game. Run, don't walk. This next one is a good one too. Now, none of y'all can tell me you haven't experienced this in this whole dating crap, okay? The magician. This person's best trick is pulling a disappearing act. Unanswered phone calls, failure to show for scheduled dates, sudden obligations that make them unavailable. They will always be able to talk their way out of it. They'll always be able to apologize their way out of it, for a while at least. This is how they move the goalposts. They're not planning on doing any better, but they want to keep stringing you along. Oh, baby, I'm so sorry. It'll never happen again. Or explaining away what they did. The truth of the matter is, I'll bet you a dime to a dollar that your gut is churning the whole time that they're talking this mess. But hey, if you're anything like me in the past, you just ignored the whole thing, just kept on plugging ahead. No. This is not going to work unless that apology is backed up with evident change. The pattern will probably continue. Don't walk, run. Oh yes, the blame game. It's everybody else's fault. Poor me. He did this, she did that, they did that. That relationship broke up because it was all their fault. This is never gonna work. You know what that tells me? When somebody is stuck in this blame game phase, they ain't ready. They're not ready. Because you have to own your own responsibility in the relationship. That tells me that they are stuck where they are not ready to own their own responsibility, and they're focused too much on what the other person did wrong or what they perceive that the other person did wrong. That's a warning sign. If this person is talking about a past relationship or multiple past relationships, and it's always ending up in it's all their fault scenario, you know what? Don't walk. Run. Trust me, your being in their life is not going to make any difference. At best, you wind up in their chain of blame for things not working out. Don't be next in line. Move on. Holy cow, you ever see somebody just blow up out of nowhere, or somebody that just completely couldn't cope, or they act like a little spoiled child throwing a tantrum when things don't go their way? Well, I call that the pressure cooker. And it's the best way to know if there's some kind of a relationship character issue with somebody that you're seeing. Observe them under pressure. How well do they function? If they can't have their way, are they throwing a tantrum? Are they blowing up and giving totally over the top responses to things that go wrong, or when they can't have that way, or when you tell them no? That's the pressure cooker. You do not want to stay cooked up with that. If you see that going on, you're not going to make it any better. I would suggest that you run, not walk. Run. I was in a relationship like that once. Okay, so this is what happened. They needed money or something. Okay, so I said that I would go to the bank, use my debit card, and get some money to loan them. Now, I'm in a relationship with this guy. And I decided I'm going to go by and pick up one of those pretzel things, Aunt Millie's or somebody. It's in all the malls. And I said, well, I'm going to go there and I'm going to get me a little something. And then I came home. Well, I couldn't find my card. Apparently, I had left it at the mall at that little place where I went to get the little pretzel. And when I came home and told them that I had lost that card, they blew up. I was counting on that card. Well, how you going to lose a card? Honey, grown man. Grown a man. You know what I want to say with the A. Boy, I was just the dirt that you walk on because I left my card. Now, Now, when I look back on that situation, I'm doing you a favor and you're treating me like I'm the one that's in the wrong. Now, you guys, I have never left my card anywhere. Never, ever have I ever left my card anywhere. And I really believe that my leaving that card was a way to set me up to see what I was dealing with. You don't want to go there. It's never going to get any better, especially if you're dealing with grown people. They're grown up already, and they haven't dealt with that. That pressure cooker, that's a dangerous person. Move on. Okay, this one's a bonus. As you're discussing things in the early part of the date, and maybe the issue of past relationships comes up, if you can find someone who has maintained a positive relationship with their ex-wife or ex-husband, if this person is someone who was able to break up without breaking the relationship, it might be a real good sign that they're well balanced. Every breakup doesn't necessarily have to be ugly or dramatic or bitter. What I'm saying is that if a person is that well balanced where they agreed to disagree with their previous relationship, and they're not on just ugly, bitter, I ain't talking to you terms, it might be a real good character sign that they're decent individuals. If, for instance, if there was a guy and he was married to a woman, they had a child, they're no longer together, you meet him after the divorce, but he maintained a positive relationship with that ex-wife because they're both raising the child. See, that's putting the child first, and that's an excellent character trait. Now, I understand that there may be unhealthy ways that people continue to keep and stay in on good terms with an ex. And I understand that for some people that might be a deal breaker coming into a relationship where they're on good terms with the ex, because you might think that maybe it's a little deeper than they're saying that it is. Then you have to navigate that for yourself. But I'm just saying that it is possible for a man and a woman to stay on decent speaking terms and cordial terms and be civil with one another after a breakup. Now, if you're talking to somebody who has a history of bitter breakups and it's all somebody else's fault, then that's a warning sign, as I said earlier. So you don't want somebody, I'd lean toward the person that maintained decent relationship with an ex sooner than I would lean toward somebody who divulged a history of negative bitterness and toxicity. That's just me. I'm just saying, I'm just throwing that out there, okay? You can do it or not. You can do it or not. Because I'm not sitting here saying that if your gut's telling you that that past relationship is more than just civil terms and that they are deeply involved still, hey, you want to exit stage freaking left. Because number one, if that's not through, you don't want to be caught up in that mix. So I would also be careful of people who are separated. Please, come on now. What is that? I mean, really. I'm separated, so now I can go out here and sow my wild oats. But in this separation stage, trust me, in the separation stage, it can be messy, messy, messy. Messy. Okay? Unless that person had totally cut ties with that ex, that there's a whole lot of going back and forth going on there that could be happening. So frankly, I would, if I were you, really reconsider it in a situation where I'm dating somebody who is still in the separation stage, because there's still no closure on that. And I have seen many situations where the husband and the wife, they're separated, but they're tipping back and forth with each other and dating on the side. If you're looking for a committed relationship, that's not a good situation to put yourself in. That's all I'm saying. Well, that's it for today. I just wanted to cover a few things to look out for. Oh, and this too. When you're out on a date, the last thing you want to do is be telling everything. Giving them the playbook, in other words. I think I mentioned this in part 1. Do more listening than talking while you're on these dates and while you're in the back and forth stage on the apps. The more you allow somebody else to talk, the more information that they will reveal about themselves. And you just put it all in the memory banks and just take notes because you're going to watch what's going on after that. I'm just saying that it might not be the best thing to do for us to jump into a physical relationship too soon in it. See, I never understood this thing about 3 dates and we sleep together or 4 dates and we sleep. What? What is that? Oh, we're on our 3rd date, so I'm better. We're going to... Really? I guess I have just been out of the mix too dang long. Because my thing is, guess what? You're going to need maybe 6 dang dates to determine whether or not this is a knucklehead you're dealing with. Okay? You need to be out with this person and observing them in lots of different life situations. You need to make sure that what they're telling you is not just chin music. You want to make sure that they are being authentic with you. You want to make sure that you know and draw boundaries with yourself. So in other words, we always talk about drawing boundaries with other people. You know what? Draw a freaking boundary and break it yourself is what can often happen if indeed you haven't drawn boundaries with yourself. In part 1, I talked about knowing your core values, knowing who you are. Knowing, and those core values being the deal breakers. You're not supposed to compromise that for anybody. Know who you are and stand your ground. Okay? Stand your ground. Be who you are. Know what you will tolerate and what you won't. And you learn all of that from making mistakes in the past. Now, anyway, I just wish you the best. I'm looking forward to seeing you again next time. And always remember that your greatest power is realizing the truth of who you are. Be sure to know that truth. Thank you for joining us today for When Your Mind Becomes the Scene of the Crime podcast. To contact Dr. Linda, just go to whosapple.org. That's WHOSEAPPLE.org.